Imagine walking through your city and suddenly your name, your religion, your identity become a death sentence. That's exactly what happened to millions of people in one of the darkest crimes in human history, the Nazi Holocaust. The time was World War II, a conflict that would become the deadliest and most widespread war in human history, stretching from 1939 to 1945. The place, Europe, a continent that, for 6 long years, became the epicenter of unimaginable violence, upheaval, and suffering. Cities that had once bustled with life and laughter were transformed into battlegrounds and ruins. Families were torn apart, and the very fabric of society was ripped to shreds. The war began with the invasion of Poland in September 1939, a moment that sent shockwaves across the globe and marked the start of a dark chapter for millions. As the conflict spread, no corner of Europe was left untouched. From the icy streets of Leningrad to the bombed-out neighborhoods of London, the war's reach was relentless. People lived in constant fear of air raids, of soldiers marching through their towns, of the unknown horrors that tomorrow might bring. The world watched as Europe descended into chaos, and the consequences would echo for generations. The perpetrator behind this devastation was Nazi Germany, a regime led by Adolf Hitler, a man whose vision for the world was rooted in hatred, violence, and a twisted ideology of racial superiority. Hitler's rise to power in the early 1930s was marked by fiery speeches, propaganda, and promises to restore Germany's former glory. But beneath the surface, his ambitions were far more sinister. The Nazi regime quickly transformed Germany into a totalitarian state, silencing dissent and demanding absolute loyalty. Hitler's government orchestrated a campaign of terror, targeting anyone who did not fit the narrow definition of the Aryan ideal. The machinery of the Nazi state was vast and efficient, mobilizing not just armies, but also police, bureaucrats, and ordinary citizens to enforce its brutal policies. The world watched in horror as Hitler's ambitions grew, leading to invasions, occupations, and the systematic persecution of millions. The swastika became a symbol of fear, and the sound of marching boots signaled the arrival of oppression and death. And the victims, the most targeted and tormented, were the Jews of Europe. Over 6 million Jewish men, women, and children were systematically hunted, rounded up, and murdered in what will become known as the Holocaust. Entire communities that had thrived for centuries were wiped out in a matter of months. Families were forced from their homes, herded into ghettos, and then transported in cattle cars to concentration camps, places designed for suffering and death. The Nazis' goal was nothing less than the complete annihilation of the Jewish people. Children were separated from their parents, elders were stripped of their dignity, and the world's silence often echoed louder than the cries for help. The Holocaust stands as one of the darkest chapters in human history, a stark reminder of the depths of cruelty that can be reached when hatred is allowed to flourish unchecked. The stories of those who perished and those who survived continue to haunt us, urging us never to forget. But the Nazis' cruelty did not stop with the Jewish people. Millions of others were swept up in the tide of hatred and violence. The Roma, often referred to as gypsies, were targeted for extermination, their communities destroyed, and their culture nearly erased. Disabled individuals, men, women, and children, were deemed unworthy of life and subjected to forced sterilizations, euthanasia programs, and mass murder. Political prisoners, including communists, socialists, and anyone who dared to speak out against the regime, were arrested, tortured, and sent to labor camps, where survival was a daily struggle. The Nazis' list of enemies was long many and ever-growing, encompassing anyone who did not fit their twisted vision of a perfect society. The suffering of these groups is often overshadowed by the sheer scale of the Holocaust, but their stories are equally important. Each victim was a person with hopes, dreams, and loved ones, lives cut short by hatred and intolerance. And honestly, the Nazis' campaign of terror extended to anyone they saw as impure or a threat to their regime. Homosexuals, Jehovah's Witnesses, Slavic peoples, and countless others found themselves in the crosshairs of Nazi brutality. The machinery of oppression was relentless, and the world would only come to fully grasp the scale of the horror after the war had ended. The legacy of World War II and the Holocaust is a warning, a reminder of what can happen when hatred is allowed to fester, when power is wielded without compassion, and when the world turns a blind eye to suffering. As we remember the victims, we must also remember our responsibility to stand up against injustice, to speak out against hatred, and to ensure that the horrors of the past are never repeated. The story of World War II is not just a tale of armies and battles. It is a story of humanity at its worst, and in the courage of survivors and liberators at its best. Hitler believed in a twisted, dangerous idea, the so-called pure Aryan race. Anyone who didn't fit that vision, in his eyes, was marked for brutal extermination. They built concentration camps like Auschwitz death factories, where people were murdered with poison gas, starved, tortured, and used for horrific medical experiments. It's honestly hard to imagine such cruelty. For years, the world stayed silent. As the shadow of war crept across Europe, the daily lives of millions were marked by uncertainty, fear, and a growing sense of dread. In cities and villages alike, people whispered rumors of atrocities, but few dared to speak out loud. Newspapers reported on battles and shifting front lines, but the true horrors unfolding behind closed borders remained shrouded in secrecy. Diplomats met in hushed rooms, weighing the cost of intervention against the risk of escalation. The silence was not just a lack of words, it was a collective paralysis, a world unsure of how to respond to the unimaginable. But when the war ended and the camps were liberated, the truth shocked everyone. Allied soldiers, hardened by years of combat, were unprepared for what they found as they pushed through the gates of the concentration camps. The scenes that greeted them were beyond comprehension. Skeletal figures staring with hollow eyes, survivors too weak to stand, and the unmistakable stench of death lingering in the air. The world, which had turned a blind eye for so long, was suddenly confronted with undeniable evidence of systematic cruelty and suffering on a scale never before witnessed. Newsreels and photographs began to circulate, and the reality of the Holocaust could no longer be ignored or denied. There were piles of bodies, broken families, and the remnants of lives destroyed by hatred. The liberators found mass graves hastily dug in the final days of the war, evidence of the desperate attempts to conceal the crimes committed. Survivors recounted stories of loved ones lost, of families torn apart, and of a world that had abandoned them in their darkest hour. The images of these atrocities, bodies stacked like cordwood, nameless and unclaimed, became seared into the collective memory of humanity. The scale of the loss was almost incomprehensible, and the grief was overwhelming, and children left with no names. In the aftermath, countless children wandered through refugee camps, clutching faded photographs or scraps of paper with names and addresses. Many had lost their entire families, their identities reduced to numbers tattooed on their arms or tags pinned to their clothing. Aid workers and relief organizations struggled to reunite siblings, to find relatives, to restore some sense of normalcy to lives shattered by war. For many, the search for family would last a lifetime, and some would never discover their true origins. The trauma of separation and loss would echo through generations, a haunting reminder of the innocence stolen by hatred and violence. All of it, proof of what happens when hatred replaces humanity. The world was forced to confront the consequences of its silence and inaction. Memorials now stand where the camps once operated, silent witnesses to the suffering endured and the lives lost. Flowers are laid on the tracks that once carried millions to their deaths, and visitors from around the globe come to pay their respects, to remember, and to vow never again. The aftermath of the Holocaust reshaped international law, inspired the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, and led to the creation of organizations dedicated to preventing such atrocities in the future. Yet the lessons of the past remain as urgent as ever. The silence that allowed such horrors to unfold must never be repeated. It is a call to vigilance, to compassion, and to the defense of human dignity, no matter the cost. The world's reaction, once marked by silence and shock, must now be defined by remembrance, education, and the unwavering commitment to stand against hatred in all its forms. The Holocaust wasn't just a crime. It was a warning to all of us. If we let hate, racism, and prejudice grow, we risk losing everything that makes us human. As we reach the end of this journey through one of the darkest chapters in human history, let us take a moment to reflect on the immense weight of what we have witnessed. The Holocaust was not just a tragedy of numbers, but a tragedy of lives. Millions of individual stories, dreams, and futures extinguished by hatred, prejudice, and indifference. Each name etched into a memorial, each photograph of a lost family, each silent stone in a field of remembrance stands as a testament to the lives that were lived, the love that was lost, and the lessons that must never be forgotten. We must remember, we must learn, so that it never happens again. The phrase, "never again," is not just a slogan, it is a solemn promise, a call to action that echoes through generations. It is a reminder that the horrors of the past can return if we allow hatred, bigotry, and intolerance to go unchallenged. The barbed wire, the empty tracks, the silent camps. These are not just relics of history, but warnings for the future. We must carry the memory of the Holocaust with us, not as a burden, but as a shield against the darkness that can so easily creep back into our world. Education, empathy, and vigilance are our tools to ensure that such evil is never allowed to flourish again. If this story touched your heart, know that you are not alone. Across the world, people gather in remembrance, lighting candles, sharing stories, and standing in silent reflection. These acts of remembrance are powerful. They connect us to the past, to those who suffered, and to each other. They remind us that even in the face of unimaginable cruelty, the human spirit endures. By remembering, we honor the victims and reaffirm our commitment to stand against hatred in all its forms. Your empathy, your willingness to learn, and your desire to make a difference are the first steps toward building a better, more compassionate world. If you found value in this story, if you believe that history must be remembered and its lessons shared, I invite you to join this community. Subscribe for more true stories that shaped our world. Hit the like button to help others discover these important narratives and become part of a movement that values truth, remembrance, and understanding. Every time you engage with content like this, you help keep these stories alive. You help ensure that the voices of the past are not silenced, but amplified for new generations to hear and learn from. Together, we can create a space where history is not just studied, but felt, where it inspires us to act with courage and compassion in our own lives. And tell me in the comments, what moved you most about this story? Was it the resilience of the survivors, the bravery of those who resisted, or the haunting silence of the places where so much suffering occurred? Your thoughts, your questions, and your reflections are vital. They help us all to process, to understand, and to grow. This channel is not just about telling stories. It's about building a community of thoughtful, engaged people who care about the world and its history. Share your perspective, ask your questions, and let's continue this important conversation together. Your voice matters, and your engagement helps shape the direction of future content. As we look ahead, I want to know what stories you want to explore next. Should the next video be about the dramatic fall of Berlin and Hitler's end? That was the final days of the Third Reich, the chaos and devastation that swept through the city, and the moment when the world finally saw the collapse of a regime built on terror? Or would you like to delve into the Nuremberg trials, where the architects of the Holocaust and the war were brought before the world to answer for their crimes? These moments are not just historical events. They are turning points that shaped the modern world, moments when justice, accountability, and the rule of law were put to the ultimate test. Where the war criminals faced justice, the world watched as the principles of humanity and international law were debated and defined. The Nuremberg trials set precedents that still influence our understanding of justice and responsibility today. Your input will help guide the next chapter of this journey through history. Thank you for watching, for remembering, and for caring. Together, we can ensure that the lessons of the past are never forgotten, and that the promise of never again is more than just words. It is a commitment we renew every day through our actions, our choices, and our willingness to stand up for what is right. Until next time, keep seeking the truth, keep remembering, and keep the light of hope alive.